The heat over Riverton pressed down like a hand that refused to lift. Evelyn Carter turned the corner where the narrow dirt path slipped between rows of abandoned storage units and dissolved into waist-high weeds. The gravel beneath her rubber boots shifted unevenly, rutted from decades-old tire tracks back when this industrial strip still meant something. When men had come here to fix carburetors, swap engines, argue over baseball, and drink cheap beer in folding chairs. Now the place felt hollow. The brick facades sagged. Corrugated metal doors hung crooked on single hinges. Through broken seams in the walls seeped the damp, metallic smell of rust and long-dead motor oil. She walked this way every Sunday. Her daughter picked up the grandkids for the weekend, and that left Evelyn with her quiet ritual. The overgrown trail, the small river beyond the lots, the modest garden plot she'd tended for more than 30 years. Tomatoes, squash, green beans, order in a world that had long ago forgotten how to stay orderly. She knew every root jutting from the ground, every loose brick, every place where the path narrowed so tight she had to turn sideways between sheet metal and stinging nettles. She wore the same gray rubber boots she'd had for years, thick wool socks patched at the heels, a skirt that brushed below her knees. Even in July, she kept a cardigan wrapped around herself. Her body betrayed her now, swinging from hot flashes to chills without warning. High blood pressure, dizziness if she moved too fast. On her head, she wore a pale knit scarf. Her late husband, Daniel, had given it to her on their 40th anniversary. 2 years later, he'd gone into the hospital for what was supposed to be routine. He never came home. The sun was brutal that afternoon. Most people would have stripped down to tank tops. Evelyn felt safer layered, safer contained. As she passed a half-open storage unit, laughter spilled out, sharp and hollow. Bottles clinked. 3 men lounged inside on salvaged car seats, smoking, talking over each other. Life clung to these ruins in small, grimy pockets. Men hiding from wives, from bills, from themselves. She didn't look at them, just lowered her scarf slightly over her forehead and walked faster. The men quieted for a moment as she passed. They didn't catcall, didn't jeer. People around here knew her. Evelyn Carter was sharp-tongued, stubborn, and didn't scare easily. At least, she hadn't used to. She reached the bend where the path dipped sharply toward a collapsed concrete fence and the remains of what had once been a small municipal boiler house. White brick, roof caved in, windows shattered long ago. She always hurried past that spot. It felt wrong, even in daylight. This time, she didn't get the chance. A sound cut through the air, raw, violent, like someone exhaling pain straight into her face. Evelyn froze. Listened. There it was again. A high, tearing whine. Thin, desperate. Not barking, not growling. Crying. The kind of cry an animal makes when it's no longer trying to escape, only begging for something to end. Her chest tightened. The sound came from near the boiler house. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to keep walking, but the cry came again, sharper, closer. And something old inside her, something that refused to let cruelty exist unchallenged, pushed her forward. She parted the weeds, ignoring the sting of nettles through her socks, and moved toward the crumbling wall. Slowly, she leaned around the concrete edge and saw. A rusted steel beam jutted from what remained of the building's frame. From it, suspended by one hind leg with thick nylon cord, hung a dog. Medium-sized, black and brown, its body jerking violently. Its head nearly brushed the dirt. Front paws clawed at empty air as if searching for ground that wasn't there. Beneath it stood 4 teenage boys. 16, maybe 17. Dark hair, athletic pants, faded t-shirts, cheap sneakers. They spoke rapidly in a language she didn't recognize, clipped, sharp syllables. 3 laughed. One held a long metal rod loosely in his hand, testing its weight. The dog screamed. Not barked, screamed. The sound vibrated through her bones. The boy raised the rod with both hands and swung. The metal struck ribs with a sickening crack. The dog's body convulsed. Blood burst through fur. A second strike landed harder, then a third, wide and deliberate. Something snapped audibly. Evelyn's vision tunneled. "Oh my God!" She stepped out from the bushes. "Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" The blows stopped. The dog hung limp now, twitching reflexively. Blood dripped into the dust below. One of the boys turned. He smiled, confused, almost amused. "Lady," he said slowly, accent thick. "Why you yell?" "Get away from that animal!" she shouted. "Are you out of your damn minds?" Her hands shook, but she bent anyway, grabbed a rock and hurled it. It landed short. The boys didn't flinch. They stared at her, and something shifted in their expressions. Curiosity, calculation. One licked his lips slowly. They began walking toward her. "Back up!" Evelyn barked, though her voice betrayed her fear. "I'm calling the police. You hear me? You touch me and you're done!" The one holding the rod tilted his head. "You throw rock," he said softly. "You scream." She understood then. This was wrong. Very wrong. She turned to leave. She managed 2 steps before the metal rod slammed across her back. White heat exploded through her spine. Her knees buckled. The world fractured. She remembered falling, remembered laughter, remembered the sky spinning blue and merciless above her. Then nothing. When she woke, machines were breathing for her. Fluorescent light burned overhead. A steady electronic beep marked time in sterile intervals. Her body felt filled with molten lead. She couldn't move. Through the glass panel of the hospital room door stood 2 figures, a doctor in a white coat and a tall man in a dark button-down shirt, her son. Detective Michael Carter of the Riverton Police Department, 42 years old, broad shoulders, sleepless eyes. The doctor spoke in a low, measured voice. "Multiple contusions, 2 fractured ribs, ruptured spleen. We stopped the internal bleeding. She's stable for now." Michael didn't move. "There are also signs of sexual assault," the doctor added carefully. "We've notified forensics." A tear slid from Evelyn's eye. She heard every word, couldn't speak, couldn't scream. Michael entered the room slowly and sat beside her bed. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm here." He took her hand gently. "You just focus on breathing. You're strong. You're going to make it." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I was promoted yesterday. Lead investigator now. I swear to you, I'll find them. Every last one." The door opened again. 2 children stepped in. Emma, 9 years old, wide-eyed and trembling, and Noah, 12, trying desperately not to cry. "Grandma?" Emma whispered. Evelyn wanted to smile, wanted to tell them she was still here, but her body refused. Only another tear answered them. Michael's jaw tightened until it trembled. "Hold on, Mom," he murmured. "For them." The doctor returned later with a syringe. "This will help you rest," he said kindly. He injected something clear into the IV line. The room softened. The monitor beeps faded. The last thing Evelyn felt was the doctor's warm hand resting on hers. Then darkness folded over her gently. 2 months later, Evelyn stood in her living room, alive, walking, stronger than anyone had predicted. Too strong, some might say. In the center of the room sat a brand new black lacquered coffin. Empty, polished, beautiful. Her neighbor, Hank Miller, stepped inside her house, until he saw it. "What in God's name is that, Evelyn?" She adjusted the white pillow lining the interior. "Figured I should see it before I'm in it," she replied calmly. "You're inviting death into your house." "I already met death," she said quietly. "It blinked first." She stepped into the coffin experimentally, lowering herself inside. Hank stared. Before he could respond, the front door burst open. Michael stood there with the kids. He saw his mother lying in a coffin, holding a candle against her chest, his face drained of all color. He collapsed where he stood. The next day, everything changed, because a little girl named Nora Miller disappeared near those same abandoned garages. And when Hank grabbed his wood-splitting axe and ran toward the boiler house, Evelyn followed. And this time, there were more men, more fire, another dog hanging over a boiling pot, and Nora standing among them. One man held her shoulder tightly, another smiled at Hank. "Old man," he said, raising his hands mockingly, "we show girl our celebration." Hank didn't hesitate. The axe buried into a collarbone with a wet crack. Chaos erupted. A second man fell with his abdomen opened wide. Someone screamed, then a gun appeared. A small, dirty handgun. Hank turned. The shot rang like thunder inside the hollow metal walls. By nightfall, investigators combed through the boiler house ruins. They found 2 dead men. They found Hank. They found Evelyn Carter. They found the mutilated remains of a dog. They did not find Nora. No blood trail, no clothing, no direction of escape. Just silence. When Detective Michael Carter closed his tablet containing the witness statements, one truth remained like a nail in his chest. His mother was dead. His neighbor was dead. And somewhere out there, a child had vanished into the shadows of abandoned steel and rust. And this time, he wasn't chasing teenagers. He was walking straight into something much darker. Detective Michael Carter didn't go home that night. He stood outside the ruins of the boiler house long after the coroner's van had pulled away, long after patrol units cleared the perimeter tape, long after the last red and blue reflections stopped flickering against rusted metal doors. The abandoned industrial strip on the edge of Riverton had returned to its natural state, silent, hollow, watching. The wind moved through broken sheet metal with a low, metallic moan. Michael stared at the dark opening of the boiler house. 2 months ago, his mother had nearly died here. Tonight, she had. And Nora Miller, 9 years old, was gone. He crouched near the spot where Hank Miller's body had fallen. Blood had pooled, then dried into black crust against cracked concrete. Forensics had already marked and bagged everything recoverable. Shell casing, .32 caliber. Cheap, unregistered. No weapon found. "Detective!" He turned. Sergeant Luis Ramirez approached, tablet tucked under his arm. Ramirez had been with the Riverton Police Department nearly 15 years. Steady, practical, rarely rattled. Tonight, his jaw was tight. "We canvassed the immediate blocks," Ramirez said. "Nobody claims to know anything. Same story we've been getting for months." Michael stood. What about vehicles? Couple of vans seen earlier in the day, white cargo, no plates visible. One witness thinks he saw something like a dark SUV parked 2 streets down, but he's not sure on timing. Michael nodded once. The dog? Ramirez exhaled slowly. Strung up the same way as the prior incident. Hind leg, nylon cord, fire underneath, pot ready. This wasn't random. No, it wasn't. Michael looked back toward the boiler house interior. Flashlights earlier had revealed something else, deeper in the rubble, partially concealed beneath warped sheet metal and old insulation. A second room. Not original to the structure, improvised. Ramirez followed his gaze. Forensics is still processing that back section, he said quietly. Michael didn't respond. He walked back inside. The air reeked of rust, wet ash, and something sweetly rotten beneath it all. In the far corner, behind a hanging tarp stiff with grease, they had found it. A space cleared deliberately, mattresses on the ground, plastic sheeting, hooks bolted into brick. Not many, just enough. Michael stepped carefully over chalk outlines and evidence markers. The hooks were clean, too clean, as if scrubbed recently, but not thoroughly enough. There were fibers caught in one bolt, a thread of pink fabric. Small, child-sized. His throat closed. "Any blood?" he asked without turning. "Not much," Ramirez answered. "Traces, but old. Mixed samples. Lab will take time." Michael crouched near the wall and touched the concrete lightly. Still faintly damp. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. "Sir," a younger officer called from the entrance. "We found tire tracks behind the tree line. Fresh, like something reversed out fast." Michael stood immediately. They followed the beam of the flashlight past the boiler house, through tall weeds and into a narrow clearing that most people wouldn't even notice unless they knew to look. There, in soft dirt shielded from wind, were distinct tread impressions. Wide, commercial, cargo vehicle. "Photograph and cast them," Michael said. He straightened slowly, scanning the dark tree line beyond. If Nora had been taken in a vehicle, it happened fast. Organized. Controlled. Not panic. Not retaliation. This wasn't about Hank. This wasn't about Evelyn. Those were consequences. Nora was the objective. By 2:17 a.m., Michael was seated in interview room B. Across from him sat one of the teenage boys from 2 months prior. 17. Name? Armand Bekoff. Picked up earlier that evening near a construction site where several undocumented laborers had been temporarily housed before vanishing again. Armand's knuckles were bruised. He stared at the metal table. "You were at the boiler house tonight," Michael said calmly. Armand shook his head. "No. You were there 2 months ago when my mother was assaulted." Silence. Michael leaned forward slightly. "You think I don't recognize faces?" Armand's jaw tightened. "You have no proof." Michael placed a photo on the table. It showed the hanging dog from 2 months ago. And in the background, blurred but visible, a figure matching Armand's height and haircut. Armand's breathing changed. "You hit that dog," Michael said. "Then you hit my mother." "She yell," Armand muttered. "She throw rock." Michael's hands curled slowly into fists beneath the table. "And tonight?" he asked evenly. "Where were you tonight?" Armand hesitated. A flicker of something. Not guilt. Fear. "Not there," he whispered. "Then why are your boots wet with ash?" Armand's eyes snapped up. Michael had noticed when he entered. Faint gray smudges along the soles. Ash that hadn't existed anywhere else except near the boiler house fire pit. Armin swallowed. "You don't understand," he said. "Then help me." A long pause. Then, "They take girl." "Who?" Armin's lips trembled slightly. "Not us." Michael didn't blink. "Who?" Armin leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the room itself might overhear. "Men who come after." A chill slid down Michael's spine. "After what?" "After we make noise," Armin said. "After fight. After blood." He shook his head rapidly. "You think we bad? You don't know." Michael felt something shift inside his chest. "Know what?" Armin swallowed hard. "They watch." "Who watches?" Armin's gaze flicked toward the ceiling camera. "Men who bring vans," he whispered. "Men who take things." Michael's heart thudded. "Take what?" Armin stared at him. "Not dogs." 3 hours later, Michael stood alone in his office. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. He replayed the interview audio again. Men who take things. He zoomed in on the tire track photographs. Commercial grade, common model used by fleet rental companies. White cargo vans. Difficult to trace without plates. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Carter?" Static. Then a distorted male voice. "You're looking in the wrong place." Michael didn't speak. "You think it's about immigrants," the voice continued calmly. "You think it's about cruelty." A pause. "It's about supply." The line went dead. Michael stood frozen. Supply. He turned slowly toward the evidence board mounted behind his desk. Photos of the boiler house. Photos of Hank. Photos of Evelyn. A school picture of Nora. Gap-toothed smile. Front teeth missing. Hair in uneven braids. Supply. His stomach turned cold. This wasn't cultural violence. It wasn't drunken brutality. It wasn't even revenge. It was business. And his mother had stumbled into it. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text message. No sender ID, just a photo. Grainy, dim lighting, concrete walls. A child-sized shoe on a dirty floor. Pink. Michael's breath stopped. Emma had owned shoes like that. Nora had worn pink sneakers the day she disappeared. Beneath the image was one line. "Stop digging." Michael stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds. Then he opened a new case folder on his desktop. He typed a new header. Operation Boiler House. He closed the blinds in his office, turned off the main lights, left only the desk lamp on. Then he called Ramirez. "Off the books," Michael said quietly when Ramirez answered. "No official reports yet." "You found something?" "I found a pattern." Silence. "What do you need?" Michael looked again at the pink shoe on his phone screen. "I need a list of every unsolved missing child within a 100-mile radius over the last 5 years. Ramirez didn't hesitate. "I'll start polling." Michael ended the call and leaned back in his chair. Outside his office window, dawn was beginning to break over Riverton. Soft orange light crept across a city that had no idea what lived in its abandoned places. His mother had told him once, when he was young, "If you ever see cruelty and walk away, you become part of it." He hadn't walked away. And now, someone was watching him. Waiting. Calculating. Somewhere in a room with concrete walls, a child was still breathing. And the men who took her believed he would stop digging. They didn't know him very well.
By noon the next day, Detective Michael Carter had 3 walls covered in missing faces. His office inside the Riverton Police Department no longer looked like a workspace. It looked like a war room. Ramirez stood near the whiteboard, flipping through a printed stack. 34 unsolved juvenile disappearances within a 100-mile radius over 5 years, he said quietly. Most categorized as runaways. A few labeled family custody disputes. 3 open abductions with no suspects. Michael didn't answer. He was studying a map of the region pinned across the wall. Red markers for each missing child. At first glance, they looked random, but not to him. "Zoom out," Michael muttered. Ramirez stepped closer to the digital display monitor and adjusted the map scale. The red dots shifted. Clusters emerged. Not in neighborhoods, not in school districts. Industrial zones. Rail yards. Abandoned warehouses. River-adjacent storage facilities. Places no one monitored closely. Places like the boiler house. Michael drew a circle around 3 dots. "All within 2 miles of freight access," he said. Ramirez swallowed. "You're thinking trafficking." "I'm thinking logistics." Michael stepped back. Dogs weren't the point. The cruelty wasn't random. It was cover, noise, distraction. For what? Michael pointed to the map again. Movement. Silence stretched between them. Ramirez rubbed his jaw.
"You think Nora's still local?" "No," Michael said without hesitation. "If this is organized, she was moved fast, within hours." "State lines?" "Maybe." Michael picked up his phone and reopened the photo he'd received. The pink sneaker on concrete. He zoomed in. The background detail sharpened slightly. There, barely visible, a faint painted line on the floor. Yellow, industrial safety marking. He opened a second window and began scrolling through images of regional warehouse interiors. "Talk to me," Ramirez said. Michael pointed at the line. "Standard forklift traffic marking, warehouse floor. That's half the buildings in the county." "I know." Michael's eyes narrowed. Then he saw something else. A number stenciled faintly on the wall behind the shoe, partially obscured. 17B. He enhanced the contrast. Or 71B. Ramirez leaned closer. Could be a storage section designation. Or a unit number. Michael straightened suddenly. Rental facilities. What? Self-storage warehouses, Michael said quickly. Large indoor complexes, numbered sections. Ramirez's eyes widened. There are dozens. Michael nodded once. Start with ones within freight proximity. Ramirez grabbed his phone. "I'll pull a list." Michael stared at the image again. Something about the lighting bothered him. He zoomed further. The overhead fixture cast a narrow cone, not wide fluorescent panels. Industrial cage light. Older building, not modern storage chain. His phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. He answered immediately. "Carter." A different voice this time. Calm, educated. "You're moving quickly," the man said. Michael felt ice crawl under his skin. "Who is this?" "You received the message?" "You have a child," Michael said flatly. A soft chuckle. "We have inventory." Michael's hand tightened around the phone. "You hurt her, and I will burn your world down." "You misunderstand your position," the voice replied. "Your mother interfered with operations. The old man escalated." "That was unfortunate. Unfortunate." Michael forced his breathing steady. "You could have left," the man continued. "But now you're looking at supply chains. That complicates things." "Tell me where she is." "No." A pause. "You have 48 hours." "For what?" "To stop." The line clicked dead. Ramirez looked up from across the room.
Another one? Michael nodded slowly. They're confident. That's not good. No, Michael said quietly. It's not. By 4:30 p.m., they had narrowed the warehouse list to 9 properties within relevant proximity. Michael insisted on driving personally. Unmarked SUV. No lights, no uniforms. The first 3 were clean. The fourth, a defunct agricultural supply depot, had been converted into artist lofts. The fifth smelled like nothing but dust. By the time they reached the 6th location, the sun was bleeding into the horizon. It sat on the outskirts of Riverton's industrial corridor, an aging brick warehouse with boarded windows and a faded sign. Midwest Textile Distribution. Closed, 2011. A rusted chain hung loose from the side gate. Michael killed the engine. No power lines active, Ramirez observed. Michael studied the structure. No signage for resale, no development permits. You thinking this is it? Michael didn't answer. He stepped out of the SUV. The air felt different here. Heavy. Still. They moved along the building's side, weapons holstered but ready. The side door had been recently replaced. Metal. New hinges. Not matching the rest of the structure. Ramirez crouched. Scratch marks, he said quietly. Repeated opening. Michael tested the handle. Locked. He stepped back and scanned the upper brickwork. One window, third from the corner, had faint condensation on the interior. Someone's inside, he murmured. Ramirez exhaled. We call this in? Michael's jaw flexed. If they called it in, word could spread.
If this was bigger than local, if someone inside the department was compromised. He remembered the voice on the phone. 48 hours. They're watching, Michael said quietly. Ramirez looked at him. You think there's a leak? I think we don't assume there isn't. Ramirez nodded slowly. Michael stepped back toward the SUV. Thermal scope? In the trunk. Minutes later, Ramirez lay prone near the side fence, peering through the scope. Heat signatures, he whispered. How many? Hard to tell. At least 4, maybe 5. Size? One smaller. Michael's pulse hammered. Child-sized. Armed? Can't see weapons, but movement's controlled. Michael stood very still. This wasn't a random holding site. This was active, operational. And if they went in wrong, Nora would vanish again, permanently. His phone buzzed once more. This time, a live video request. Unknown sender. Michael answered. The screen flickered. Grainy feed. Concrete room. Yellow safety line. Section number clearly visible now. 17B. A chair. Nora sat in it, hands bound, gagged, eyes wide, alive. Michael forced himself not to react outwardly. The camera shifted. A masked figure stepped partially into frame. You found one of our buildings, the man said calmly. Good work. Michael's voice remained steady. Let her go. No. The man tilted his head slightly. You have 47 hours remaining. The feed cut. Michael lowered the phone slowly. Ramirez looked at him. That was live? Yes. From here? Michael looked at the warehouse. Condensation in the window. Heat signatures. Section 17B. They want us to rush, Ramirez said. Michael nodded. They want leverage. And? Michael holstered his weapon deliberately. And we don't rush. He turned back toward the SUV. We watch. We wait. We learn. Ramirez hesitated. What if they move her? Michael's eyes hardened. Then we make sure they can't. As darkness settled fully over the industrial district, Michael positioned himself across the street with binoculars. Lights flickered faintly inside the warehouse now. Movement near the loading dock.
A white cargo van reversed slowly toward the rear entrance. Michael's breath slowed. Supply chain. Movement. He clicked his radio, but not to dispatch, to a private channel. "Unit ready?" he asked quietly. Static, then a familiar voice. "Ready." Michael didn't look surprised, because he hadn't told Ramirez everything. While Ramirez pulled missing persons data, Michael had made another call, to someone he trusted outside the department. Someone who owed him. Someone who operated where official jurisdiction blurred. The white van doors opened. 2 men stepped out, masked, calm, methodical. Michael whispered into the radio. "Now." Across the roofline of a neighboring building, a suppressed rifle cracked softly, barely more than a cough. One masked man dropped instantly. The second spun in confusion. Another soft crack. He fell beside the van. Inside the warehouse, movement erupted, shouting. Michael drew his weapon. "This is it," he said to Ramirez. Sirens were still silent. No backup inbound. No official record. Just 2 men stepping into a building that wasn't supposed to exist. And somewhere inside? Section 17B. A child waited. The first thing Michael Carter registered was the smell. Not rot, not chemicals. Fear. It hung in the air like something physical, metallic, sharp, mixed with detergent and old brick dust. He and Ramirez moved through the side entrance fast and low. The lock had already been breached from the inside when the 2 men ran toward the loading dock. Someone had panicked. Good. Panic created mistakes. The interior of the warehouse opened into a wide distribution floor. Old conveyor frames remained bolted to concrete. Industrial cage lights cast tight cones downward, leaving wide pockets of shadow between them.
Forklift tire marks scored the yellow-lined lanes, and there, painted clearly on the concrete wall ahead, 17B. Michael's heart pounded once, hard. A metal door beneath the marking stood slightly ajar. Ramirez positioned left, Michael right. He counted down silently with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They breached. The room inside was smaller than expected, partitioned from the larger warehouse with insulated panels. Plastic sheeting hung from the ceiling rails, folding table, 2 empty folding chairs, a single camera mounted high in the corner. The chair in the center was empty. Michael's stomach dropped. "Clear," Ramirez barked after sweeping the back corner. Michael moved forward quickly. On the floor lay a strip of pink fabric, cut clean, not torn. He crouched and picked it up. Sneaker lining. Nora had been here, minutes ago. Ramirez swore under his breath. They moved her. Michael stood and scanned the room. There, near the far wall, a small square hatch in the concrete, flush with the floor, industrial drain access. He knelt and pried it open. Not a drain. A reinforced shaft with ladder rungs bolted downward into darkness. Ramirez stared. Underground? Michael didn't hesitate. Flashlight. They descended. The air grew cooler, heavier. The shaft opened into a narrow corridor beneath the warehouse foundation, likely part of the building's old textile routing system. Except this had been modified. Electrical conduit recently installed. Motion sensors. Doors. 3 of them. Each marked with stenciled letters. 17A, 17B, 17C. Michael's pulse roared in his ears. "This isn't a holding room," Ramirez whispered. "No," Michael said quietly. "It's staging." A sound echoed faintly from deeper down the corridor. Metal sliding. Wheels. Michael raised his weapon. They advanced. At the corridor's end stood a freight elevator platform. Not original. Recently installed hydraulic system, still humming faintly.
The platform was rising, taking something up.
"Damn it," Ramirez muttered. Michael lunged forward and slammed the emergency stop lever. The motor screamed and jerked violently. The platform shuddered to a halt mid-ascent. Michael grabbed the ladder mounted along the elevator shaft wall. "Cover me." He climbed, fast. The platform edge came into view. Two masked men stood inside. Between them, a metal transport crate. Vent holes cut into its sides. Michael swung up and fired. One masked man dropped immediately. The second reached for a weapon. Too slow. Ramirez's shot from below caught him in the shoulder. He collapsed against the crate. Michael shoved him aside and dropped to his knees beside it. "Nora!" he shouted. A muffled whimper came from inside. He ripped open the latch. Nora blinked up at him through tears, wrists zip-tied, mouth taped. Alive, terrified, but alive. Michael cut the restraints quickly. "It's okay," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "You're safe. I've got you." Her body shook violently as he lifted her out. She clung to him instantly. Ramirez climbed up behind him. "We need to move," Ramirez said. "Now!" From above, warehouse floor level, footsteps thundered. More than two. Michael felt the shift in atmosphere immediately. The calm precision from earlier was gone. This was escalation. He handed Nora to Ramirez. "Take her to the SUV, back route." "What about you?" Michael's eyes hardened. "I'm finishing this." Ramirez didn't argue. He disappeared down the ladder with Nora. Michael turned toward the stairwell access at the far end of the platform. If there were more of them, they were regrouping upstairs. He ascended quickly, weapon ready. The warehouse floor felt different now, no longer controlled. Boxes overturned, lights swinging. A distant door slammed. Michael moved between conveyor frames. A shadow darted near the far office mezzanine. He fired once, missed. The figure vanished behind steel shelving. Then, a slow clap echoed from the upper catwalk. Michael looked up. A man stood there, unmasked, mid-40s, well-groomed, business casual, calm. "You're persistent," the man said conversationally. Michael recognized the voice instantly, the caller. "You're finished," Michael replied. The man smiled faintly. "No, you've simply disrupted one node." "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. "Does that matter?" Michael took a step forward. "You took a child." "I allocate assets," the man corrected. "You interfere emotionally. That's inefficient." Michael fired. The man stepped back smoothly. The bullet shattered railing but missed flesh. "You really think this building is the operation?" the man continued calmly, retreating along the catwalk. "This is logistics." Michael moved toward the stair access. "You're not big enough to understand the full structure." "You killed my mother." A pause. The man's expression flickered slightly. "Your mother created liability." Michael climbed the stairs two at a time. "You turned a blind eye when it was only immigrants beating dogs," the man said, voice echoing down the steel frame. "You acted only when it touched you personally." Michael reached the catwalk level. The man stood near an exit door at the far end. "You're wrong," Michael said evenly. "Am I?" The man pulled a small device from his pocket. Thumb hovered over a button. Michael froze. "Explosives?" he asked quietly. The man smiled. "Contingency." Michael scanned the ceiling. Wires, charges placed along support beams. "If I can't use the building," the man continued calmly, "no one can." "You're inside it," Michael said. The smile widened. "You assume I don't plan exits."
He pressed the button halfway, not fully. A warning. "You have your child back," the man said. "Walk away." Michael's mind raced. If he shot him, the man could still trigger. If he rushed him, same risk. The man's thumb rested lightly, confident, prepared. "You won't do it," Michael said quietly. The man raised an eyebrow.
"You need infrastructure," Michael continued. "Insurance. Evidence destroyed means scrutiny, federal scrutiny." The man's gaze sharpened. "You're not a radical, you're an operator. You survive by staying invisible." A long beat. Michael lowered his weapon slightly. "Let's talk." Silence. The warehouse creaked. Far in the distance, faint sirens began to wail. Ramirez must have made the call after all. The man's eyes flicked toward the sound. "You escalated," he said softly. "You underestimated," Michael replied. The sirens grew louder. The man exhaled slowly. Then in one fluid motion, he threw the device across the catwalk and dove through the exit door. Michael lunged for the device, caught it. Thumb button depressed halfway, not fully engaged. He released it carefully. Nothing detonated. By the time he reached the exit door, the alley outside was empty. Only a black SUV accelerating into traffic. No plates visible. Michael stood there, breathing hard. Behind him, sirens screamed closer. He had Nora. He had dead operatives. He had a warehouse. But the man? The man had walked away. And that meant something far worse. Because confident criminals only walk away when they know they can rebuild. 20 minutes later, paramedics wrapped Nora in a thermal blanket. Ramirez approached Michael quietly. "She keeps asking for her grandfather." Michael's throat tightened. "He died protecting her," Ramirez said gently. Michael nodded once. "She also said something else." "What?" Ramirez hesitated. "She said there were more kids before her." Michael felt the ground shift under his feet. "How many?" "She doesn't know. But she said sometimes the doors down there weren't empty." Michael looked back at the warehouse, at the shaft beneath it, at the numbered doors. 17A, 17B, 17C. How many warehouses? How many sections? How many nodes? His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered without hesitation. Silence at first. Then the calm voice again. "You did well," the man said. Michael's jaw tightened. "You think this ends here?" he demanded. "No," the man replied smoothly. "This is where it begins." The line disconnected. Michael lowered the phone slowly. Behind him, emergency lights painted the warehouse red and blue. In his arms earlier had been one saved child. But somewhere beyond Riverton, beyond state lines, the supply chain still moved. And now it knew his name. The warehouse burned anyway. Not in an explosion. Michael had secured the trigger device. But in something slower, intentional, deliberate. By the time the fire department declared the structure unstable, half the evidence room beneath it had been swallowed by flame. Accelerant. Timed. Someone inside had known exactly which structural beams to ignite. Michael stood across the street from the wreckage as dawn bled gray across Riverton. He didn't speak, didn't blink. The operation had been dismantled, but not dismantled enough. Someone had pulled the emergency purge. Ramirez stepped beside him, holding 2 paper cups of bad coffee. "They torched the lower corridor first," Ramirez said quietly. "Fire investigators confirmed. Separate ignition point." Michael took the cup, but didn't drink. "That means?"
It means there was someone else down there. Not just the two men at the van, not just the caller. A cleanup crew. Michael stared at the rising smoke. They were ready to erase, he murmured. Ramirez nodded grimly. And someone tipped them. That word lingered between them. Tipped. Michael's jaw tightened. Inside the department? City administration? Bigger? Nora was safe. That was the immediate victory. But the network had survived. And now it knew he wouldn't back down. 3 days later, Nora sat in a quiet interview room at the Riverton Police Department. No cameras this time. No one-way mirror. Just Michael, a child psychologist, and a box of crayons. Nora drew while she talked. Not about the men, not about the crate. About doors. So many doors, she whispered.
How many? Michael asked gently.
She shrugged. Like a hallway and numbers.
What numbers? She pressed purple crayon hard into paper.
17, she said.
Michael felt something lock into place. Only 17? She shook her head slowly.
That's just where I was. The psychologist met Michael's eyes. Proceed carefully.
Michael softened his voice. Did you hear other kids?
A pause. Nora nodded. Sometimes crying, sometimes not.
Did you see them?
Another pause. She pressed black over the drawing now. I saw one girl.
How old?
Like me.
Where is she now?
Nora didn't answer. She just kept coloring. Harder. Until the crayons snapped in half. By the end of the week, federal authorities had stepped in. Not because of Michael's request, because the warehouse fire had triggered insurance and interstate property flags, and because 2 of the dead men's fingerprints had matched ongoing investigations in 3 different states. The case moved beyond Riverton, beyond the department. Michael found himself seated in a conference room inside the regional field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Across from him sat Special Agent Dana Holloway, 40s, sharp eyes, no wasted motion. "You disrupted a transit hub," Holloway said calmly. "But not the structure." Michael leaned back. "I figured." She slid a file across the table. Inside were photos, warehouses, storage facilities, freight depots, across multiple states, each labeled with alphanumeric sections. 17B isn't unique, Holloway said. It's a template. Michael's stomach turned. "How big?" he asked. Holloway held his gaze. "Big enough." Silence. Michael tapped the table once. "You knew." Holloway didn't flinch. "We suspected." "And you let it operate?" "We monitored." Michael leaned forward. Children were being staged. "We needed the network." His hands curled slowly. "My mother died because she walked into one of your monitored nodes." Holloway's expression didn't change, but her voice did.
"I'm sorry for your loss."
"That doesn't answer the question." She closed the file calmly. "You forced acceleration. Now they're scattering." Michael exhaled sharply. "So what? We let them keep moving kids?" "No," Holloway said evenly. "Now we squeeze." She slid a second photo across the table. The man from the catwalk. Clearer this time. No mask. Corporate ID badge clipped to his belt. Name partially visible. Halden. Michael stared. "You have a name." "An alias," Holloway corrected. "But yes." "Why wasn't he arrested before?" "Because until you engaged directly, we didn't have him on camera." Michael's pulse slowed slightly. "So now?" Holloway leaned back. "Now he knows you." "And?"
And that makes you leverage. Michael went very still. You want me visible, he said quietly. Yes. You want him to react. Yes. You're using me. Holloway met his stare evenly. He already declared you an obstacle. We can either let him hunt you privately, or we control the board. Michael stood. My daughter's 9. I know. My son's 12. I know. You think I'm risking them? Holloway's gaze sharpened. He already marked you. Silence. That truth settled heavy in the room. Michael slowly sat back down. What's the play? Holloway folded her hands. We leak controlled information. You appear frustrated, divided from federal support. You push publicly for local control. And he bites. He believes you're emotional, predictable. Michael almost smiled. He does. Holloway returned the look. Good. That night, Michael sat alone in his house for the first time since his mother's funeral. The scarf she used to wear still hung by the coat rack. He didn't move it. Couldn't. Emma and Noah were asleep upstairs. He walked through the house quietly, checked the locks, checked the windows, checked the backyard twice. When he returned to the living room, he noticed something on the kitchen counter. A package. No postage, no return address. His pulse quickened.
He hadn't heard a delivery. He approached slowly. Inside the small box, a folded knit scarf, identical to his mother's, and beneath it, a photo. Emma leaving school earlier that day, taken from across the street. Michael didn't blink, didn't react outwardly. He simply stared. Then he picked up his phone. "Agent Holloway," he said when she answered. "They made contact?" "Yes." "What did they send?" Michael's voice was steady. "A reminder?" There was silence on the other end. Then Holloway said quietly, "Good." Michael's jaw tightened. "You call this good?" "It means he's not finished with you." Michael stared at the photo of his daughter. He understood the game. Escalation, pressure, psychological leverage. He set the photo down carefully. "Then let's make sure he stays interested," Michael said. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked softly as one of his children shifted in sleep. Michael walked to the window and looked out into the dark street of Riverton. Somewhere beyond the city, Halden was rebuilding, relocating nodes, adjusting routes. But he'd made one mistake. He'd stepped into Michael's home, and that changed the equation. Because this wasn't just about dismantling a supply chain anymore. It was about ending it, completely, even if it meant burning everything that survived the fire. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the folded scarf in front of him, the photo of Emma beside it. Halden hadn't threatened him directly. He hadn't needed to. The message was precise. We can reach your house. Michael replayed every security camera feed from the exterior system he'd installed 2 months earlier, after his mother left the hospital. Nothing. No vehicle stopped. No visible approach. The package had appeared in the blind zone between the porch column and the garage angle. A calculated drop. Professional. He texted Holloway only 2 words. "He's close." Her reply came within seconds. "Good. Stay public." Michael exhaled slowly. If Halden was watching, then he needed something to see. By noon, local news stations were running footage of Detective Carter exiting the federal building in downtown Riverton. He didn't avoid the cameras, didn't deflect questions. He stepped directly into them. "We will not hand over this investigation," he said firmly, voice edged with visible frustration. "This started here, it ends here." A reporter called out, "Are you criticizing federal involvement?"
Michael paused deliberately. I'm saying local law enforcement understands this city better than anyone. He walked off without answering further questions. Within an hour, the clip was everywhere. By evening, Holloway called. He'll see that, she said. That's the point. You're painting yourself as territorial. I am territorial. Holloway didn't argue. He believes you're emotional. Let him. Michael stared out the window at his quiet neighborhood. Now what? We wait. Waiting was the hardest part. 3 days passed. Nothing. No calls, no packages, no movement on known rental properties. Halden had gone quiet. That meant he was recalculating. On the 4th night, Michael drove alone to the edge of the industrial district. He parked 2 blocks from the burned warehouse. The skeleton of Midwest Textile Distribution still stood behind police barriers, blackened and hollow. He stepped out and walked toward it alone. No radio, no backup. If Halden was watching, this was bait. Michael moved slowly, deliberately, as if he were grieving, as if he were lost in thought. He stopped near the loading dock and stared at the charred entrance. I know you're here, he said aloud. The words carried into empty metal. Silence. Then, a soft crunch of gravel behind him. Michael didn't turn immediately. You're predictable, Halden's calm voice said. Michael turned slowly. Halden stood near the alley mouth, hands in pockets, no visible weapon. Same composed expression, same measured breathing.
You came alone, Halden observed.
So did you, Halden smiled faintly.
Not exactly.
Michael scanned subtly. Rooftops, shadows, vehicles. Nothing obvious. What do you want? Michael asked. Halden tilted his head. You disrupted infrastructure worth millions. You trafficked children. Halden's expression didn't change. Terminology. Michael took 1 step closer. You sent a message to my house. Yes. Why? Halden studied him carefully. To assess thresholds. And? You haven't broken. Michael's jaw tightened. Try harder. A flicker of amusement crossed Halden's face. You think this is personal. It is. No, Halden said quietly. It's structural. He stepped closer. We move what is demanded. Demand doesn't disappear because you're angry. Michael's pulse thudded once. How many locations? Halden smiled. You're still thinking in buildings. Michael lunged forward without warning, fast. He grabbed Halden by the collar and slammed him against the brick wall. For a split second, Halden looked surprised. Then, calm again. You won't kill me, Halden said softly. Michael's forearm pressed against his throat. Why not? Because you want answers. Halden's eyes flicked briefly to the right. Michael saw it, too late. A shape moved in peripheral vision. A gunshot cracked. Pain exploded across Michael's shoulder. He staggered back. A masked man emerged from shadow near the alley dumpster, pistol raised. Michael rolled behind a concrete barrier instinctively. Second shot shattered brick inches from his head. Halden stepped out of direct line of fire smoothly. I told you, he called calmly. Not alone. Michael drew his weapon left-handed, despite the pain, and fired twice toward the masked shooter. 1 bullet hit. The masked man dropped hard. Silence followed. Michael's shoulder burned hot and wet. He forced himself up slowly. Halden stood 15 feet away now, not running, watching. You're bleeding, Halden observed.
You missed, Michael replied through clenched teeth. Halden's gaze shifted to the fallen shooter. You cost me personnel. You cost families their children. A long pause. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. closer this time. Halden exhaled softly. You're becoming inconvenient. Michael raised his weapon again. You're done. Halden's expression changed. Not fear, disappointment. You still don't understand scale. He reached slowly into his jacket. Michael tensed. But instead of a weapon, Halden pulled out a small flash drive. He tossed it across the pavement. It slid to a stop near Michael's boot. Proof of concept, Halden said. Sirens grew louder. Halden stepped backward toward the alley exit. If you release that publicly, you destabilize markets you can't even see. Michael's finger tightened on the trigger. Stop walking. Halden stopped, but only briefly. You think removing me ends it? He asked quietly. It decentralizes. Michael didn't blink. Good. Halden studied him. Then, without another word, he stepped into the dark mouth of the alley and vanished. Police cruisers screeched into the street seconds later. Ramirez jumped out of the lead vehicle. Jesus, Mike! Michael lowered his weapon slowly. I'm fine. You shot! Through and through. Ramirez looked toward the alley. Where is he? Gone. Paramedics rushed forward. Michael ignored them long enough to pick up the flash drive from the pavement. He turned it over in his hand. No label, no marking, just black plastic. Ramirez followed his gaze. What's that? Something he wants me to fear. An hour later, inside a secured evidence room at the Riverton Police Department, Michael inserted the drive into an isolated terminal. Holloway stood beside him now. No hesitation this time. The screen loaded slowly, then folders appeared. Shipping manifests, cryptocurrency wallets, video clips. Grainy footage of children moving through different warehouse sections. Dates, locations. Coordinates. Not just Riverton, not just this state. National, possibly international. Holloway's face hardened. He just handed us leverage, she murmured. Michael didn't look away from the screen. He handed us bait. Holloway glanced at him. You think it's incomplete? I think it's curated. Michael scrolled further. Near the bottom, a single video labeled Carter. His blood ran cold. He clicked it. The video opened to a familiar suburban street. His street. Timestamp from earlier that week. A zoomed frame of Emma walking toward the school entrance. The clip froze. Then a message appeared over black screen. 48 hours remain. Michael closed the laptop slowly. He's escalating, Holloway said. No, Michael replied quietly. He's preparing. For what? Michael looked toward the dark window reflection of himself. For a final move. Outside, the city lights of Riverton flickered against low clouds. Halden had stopped hiding. He had stopped operating quietly. He was forcing a confrontation. And Michael had exactly 48 hours to decide whether he would follow the rules or break them. Michael Carter didn't go home after watching the video. He couldn't. The timestamp burned into his mind 3 days earlier. Emma walking into school, unaware she was being measured like inventory. 48 hours. That wasn't a threat. It was a countdown. Inside the regional field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Dana Holloway stood across from him, arms folded. He wants you reactive, she said calmly. Michael didn't look at her. He wants proximity. Or he wants extraction, Holloway countered. You move wrong, he disappears. Michael finally met her gaze. He's not disappearing. Why? Because he's proud. Holloway studied him. You're sure? Michael nodded once. He believes he's architect, not foot soldier. Architects don't run. They demonstrate.
Silence.
Then Holloway said quietly, "What's he demonstrating?" Michael turned the monitor back on and replayed the video file tree from the flash drive. Shipping logs, node locations, financial funnels. It wasn't chaos. It was elegant, modular, distributed. Decentralization, Michael muttered. What? He said removing him decentralizes. Holloway's expression shifted slightly. You think he's not at the top? I think he's the visible layer. Michael scrolled deeper into metadata. Most of the files had identical compression signatures, but one folder was different. Older format, different encryption, time-stamped years earlier, before Halden appeared in any surveillance. Michael clicked it. A blueprint filled the screen. Not of a warehouse, of a port. Shipping containers, transit lanes, dock scheduling overlays. Holloway leaned closer. That's not Riverton. No, Michael said quietly. The header read, Lake Point Intermodal Terminal. Just outside the city limits, technically within Ohio, but federally regulated. Michael felt something lock into place. Freight, he said. He wasn't moving kids out of warehouses. Where then? Michael zoomed in on container ID numbers. Several matched codes embedded in the warehouse manifests. He looked at Holloway. He's staging through industrial sites, but final movement is maritime. Holloway's face hardened. You're saying international? Michael nodded. And if he's escalating, he won't run. He'll execute one last movement. When? Michael checked the metadata again. The most recent container routing update was scheduled for departure. Tomorrow night. 46 hours from the message. Holloway didn't hesitate. I'll get warrants. No, Michael said sharply. She paused. Why not? He wants a federal response. Big. Loud. And if he's watching port access feeds, he'll reroute. Holloway exhaled slowly. You're suggesting what? Michael's jaw tightened. I go in as local. Small presence. No port shutdown. Holloway studied him for a long moment. You're asking me to let you freelance on federal ground. I'm asking you to let him think I'm still emotional. Silence stretched. Then Holloway gave a tight nod. You get one window. The Lake Point Intermodal Terminal sprawled along dark water, cranes silhouetted against sodium lights. Containers stacked like silent cities. Michael parked 2 blocks away in an unmarked vehicle. He wore plain clothes, no badge visible, no marked unit, just a concealed weapon and a radio earpiece linked to Holloway's encrypted channel. Thermals show minimal staff on Dock C, Holloway's voice murmured in his ear. Container 17C flagged for outbound load at 2300. 17, again. Michael moved along the perimeter fence, cutting through a maintenance gap Holloway had quietly authorized. The air smelled like diesel and lake water. He stayed low between container rows until he saw it. 17C. Stacked on a transport chassis, rear doors sealed, but not officially tagged. Michael checked the lock. Fresh. He heard something faint inside. Movement. A soft knock. His pulse spiked. He broke the seal and pulled the doors open. Inside, 2 crates. Metal. Vent holes. Identical to the one Nora had been held in. Michael tore the first open. Empty. The second? A teenage girl. 14, maybe. Unconscious but breathing. Not Emma, but someone's child. Michael exhaled sharply. Holloway, he whispered. Confirmed live cargo. Understood. Tactical units moving in.
No, Michael said. Too late. Footsteps echoed behind him, slow, measured. Michael turned. Halden stood 10 yards away between container stacks. No mask, no panic. You found the wrong box, Halden said calmly. Michael's eyes narrowed. There are more. Halden smiled faintly. Always. Michael raised his weapon. Where is my daughter? Halden tilted his head. She's not here. Michael didn't lower the gun.
You filmed her? Yes. Why? To observe reaction curve. Michael's finger tightened slightly on the trigger. You think this is a game? No, Halden said softly. It's infrastructure. Michael took one step closer. You're done. Halden's expression didn't change. Kill me, and someone else activates the remaining roots. Who? Halden almost looked amused. You still want hierarchy? Michael's radio crackled faintly. Units approaching. Halden heard it too. You brought them, Halden said quietly. Michael didn't answer. Halden's gaze shifted toward the lake beyond the cranes. You think tonight ends it? Michael's voice was steady. It ends you. Halden studied him for one final, long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He lifted both hands. Empty. No detonator. No weapon. I won't run, he said. Michael didn't move. Sirens began rising in the distance. Halden continued calmly. You remove me. The network fragments, smaller cells, harder to trace. Good. Halden's eyes flicked to the rescued girl behind Michael. You save 1, 2, 10. Michael's jaw clenched. And I dismantle the rest. Halden's expression softened, almost pitying. You dismantle nothing. You create pressure. Michael stepped closer until the barrel of his gun pressed against Halden's chest. You miscalculated one thing. And what's that? Michael's eyes were ice. I don't care about structure. A beat of silence. I care about ending it. Halden searched his face, looking for doubt. There was none. Police vehicles flooded the dock entrance now. Federal units sealed perimeter gates. Halden slowly lowered himself to his knees, hands still raised. No theatrics, no resistance. As agents swarmed forward and cuffed him, he looked up at Michael one last time. This isn't the last node, he said quietly. 48 hours later, Emma walked out of school again. This time, federal protection surrounded the block discreetly. Michael watched from across the street. No vans, no cameras, no shadows that didn't belong. Halden was in custody, but the files from the flash drive were real. Multiple states, multiple docks, multiple section numbers. 17A, 17B, 17C. Templates. Michael stood in the quiet suburban afternoon of Riverton and understood something deeply unsettling. Halden hadn't lied. He wasn't the top. He wasn't even the architect. He was middle management with vision. That meant someone above him had just lost a valuable asset. And powerful systems don't collapse quietly. They adapt. Emma ran toward him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Dad! He held her tightly, longer than usual. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Yeah. But as he looked over her shoulder at the street beyond, he knew something fundamental had changed. The boiler house was gone. The warehouse burned. The port node intercepted. Halden captured. But the pattern remained. Distributed. Modular.
silent. Michael Carter had won the battle that started between rusted garages and a hanging dog. He had saved Nora. He had stopped a shipment. He had put a name in handcuffs. But the war? The war had only just revealed itself. And this time, he wasn't reacting. He was hunting. The city of Riverton slept that night, believing the nightmare had ended. Michael knew better. Somewhere beyond state lines, beyond ports, beyond warehouses with numbered sections, a new node was already coming online. And he would be ready.